Hello and good afternoon, friends. Welcome to the EduSet lecture. In various sessions of ours, we try to bring for you different subjects, and under different subjects, we try to cover different topics. In this session, we are going to talk about nutrients management, and under this very subject, we are going to talk about that how nutrients management is emerging as a multidisciplinary challenge. And for this, we have in our studio Dr. N. Raghuram. He is Associate Professor in School of Biotechnology, Guru Gobind Singh University. First of all, I would like to welcome our guest, our lecturer, Dr. N. Raghuram. Doctor, you're very welcome to our EduSet lecture of ours, and I would be obliged if you would tell all our viewers on this very topic what it is and how can we know more about it.
Thank you. Well, nutrient management is increasingly becoming a challenge that has to be met both from food production, energy production, environment management, and many other sectors of governance, which means it's also becoming an important area where scientists from different disciplines have to come together to be able to address different parts of that challenge. Because nutrients are required for all areas of development, as you can see from the slides. India has 3.3 million square kilometers of land, but on that land it has to feed 1.2 billion people. It has a coastline of 7,516 kilometers. India also has a large diversity of 127 agroclimatic zones which deal with various soil type, rainfall type, temperature, humidity, variety of conditions that determine agriculture. 14 soil types. India has the largest variety of soil types in the whole world, and about 47,000 species of plants. So we are talking, even from the point of view of food and agriculture, a very diverse set of conditions under which we have to do this agriculture. The other important challenge is that India occupies only 2.4% of the world land area, but it has to feed 16.2% of the world population. The food grain output must grow from 250 million tons, which is now approximately in that range, to at least 300 million tons by 2020, within the next 6 to 7 years. That's a very, very major challenge. And as you can imagine, food production requires constant supply of nutrients. We provide fertilizers or manures or residue, in whatever form you provide inputs to agriculture. They all eventually are taken by plants as nutrients, and many crops or plants or plant products are also consumed by animals, including dairy animals or meat producing animals, or feed for poultry, chicken, a variety of areas. So as your slide can show you, the lowest panel on the left side shows you that food production in terms of crops. The middle panel shows you food production in terms of animal production, meat, dairy, poultry, chicken, everything, for which some of the agricultural products are used as feed. And of course there are also energy production, fuels, including biofuels these days, some of which are produced from crop materials. So all these are constantly human activities for which nutrients are taken from the croplands. And if you are doing repetitive agriculture, which is what agriculture is all about, then you have to replenish these nutrients in the agro ecosystem, which means you then add some of these things back, either as manure or as fertilizer or biofertilizer, whatever else. Sometimes you may have some and the most important fertilizers we give are nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, NPK. The standard the most important macro nutrients the ones which are supplied in large quantities in agriculture. Of course, there are other smaller nutrients, micronutrients, which are also supplied in certain advanced forms of agriculture. But all these nutrients, the most important ones being nitrogen, the nitrogen cycle in the agro ecosystem is what you are watching on the slide. And there are similar cycles for phosphorus, for potassium, for many important nutrients. These nutrients, as long as they remain within the agro ecosystem or within the dairy farming or poultry or whichever food production system we are using them, they are very useful for food production. But if they leak out from there, as you can see in the slide, either they can leach into surface waters through runoff, or they can leach down through the soil or into the groundwater table, and eventually they can be transported to long distances into streams, rivers, or even reach the sea. Of course, there are also, in the case of nitrogen, there are certain processes like gaseous forms of reactive nitrogen, N2O, NO2, NOx, which come from either industries or vehicles or a few other forms. They can enter into the atmosphere, and some of them can come back into the agro ecosystem in the form of rain, what we call as precipitation in environment science language. So some nutrients can be brought back through rain as dissolved nitrogen or other compounds. Phosphate compounds don't come through rain, they come largely through soil or water supplied to the crops, or as manure or whatever else. So this is so from food production you have crop production, you have animal production, meat production and other products, and even certain fuels, biofuels. So a lot of developmental activity centers around the access and availability and assurity of nutrients. Food security, in other words, depends on nutrient security. However, when these nutrients do not remain confined to the food production system, and when they leak out into the environment, either into the groundwater table through seepage of water from the fields, or through surface waters, canals, streams, rivers, eventually they all reach the sea. But sea is a place where they accumulate over a long period of time, and we are talking about anthropogenic nutrient loading into agriculture and other food systems over several hundreds of years. It's not just chemical agriculture that we are talking about, which started only during the period of Green Revolution in the last 40-50 years. Even prior to that, we were using other forms of replenishing nutrients in the crop, either by growing pulses or other means, or using manures or various things. By the way, nutrient leakage into the environment, eventually reaching the seas, happens not only due to agriculture, though it is increasingly becoming an important source, especially because of repetitive cropping, intensive cropping, intensive use of fertilizers, even more importantly intensive use of chemical fertilizers. But there could also come from other sources. As you can see on the slide, they can come from wastes of aquaculture, they can come from municipal wastage, sewage, industrial effluents, port activities, oil spills, a variety of activities, including but not limited to agriculture, can release a variety of pollutants or effluents, and many of these effluents actually have nutrients. So that's an important aspect that is often not recognized. What we often consider as a pollutant in sewage or in bird dropping or in industry effluent might actually have some important nutrients which should have been in a food production system. So the problem that we face is that nutrients that are always required in food production system, instead of remaining there, they are landing up in places where we don't want them. They land up in rivers, in groundwater, in sea, and they have a lot of undesirable effects when they accumulate in the wrong places. Often our pollution management systems treat every pollutant as something to be removed and thrown out. But in the process, we might also be removing certain nutrients and throwing them out. If only you recognize the importance of these pollutants as nutrients somewhere else, what is a nutrient at one place is a pollutant at another place. Can we close the loop? Can we recover the nutrients from the pollutant sources? Can we somehow bring them back into food production system? Just as traditionally we used animal waste like cow dung and urine in the crops. Can that also be done for other kinds of domestic sewage? Can that be done for various other effluents? This is an important question that is increasingly being asked, because you have a problem of many water sources, including drinking water sources, that are becoming highly polluted with nutrients, and these nutrients just do not remain there. They cause effects on the aquatic ecosystem. So they make the water green. Sometimes there can be growth of weeds, there can be toxicity due to excessive accumulation of certain nutrients. So there can be health effects, there can be effects on animals which feed on that water. And if people who depend on fish, the fish may not grow after a certain amount of accumulation of these nutrients, they become toxic. So these are issues that are now becoming a major area of concern. Just a few years ago, as you can see on the slide, there was a report in Nature, one of the best known magazines, journals for science. They have tried to look at the carrying capacity of Earth as a planet from a variety of things that happen on the Earth. There is atmospheric pollution, there is chemical pollution. As you can see in the center on the top, there is climate change, there is ocean acidification in clockwise if you look at it, then there is stratospheric ozone depletion, and the red band on the right is nitrogen accumulation. Then the next band is phosphorus cycle, and these two are very important nutrients that we will be talking about today. Their accumulation in the Earth's ecosystem has grown beyond all capability of Earth as a planet to repair itself. So the green circles in the center of the Earth planet are indication of the safety zone we have. The innermost green circle is the safest area of any of these things. If they are within that area, Earth can manage itself with that much pollution. The outer green area, it is still possible for certain kinds of pollution, and the remaining areas, especially the red bands going out of those green circles, show those kinds of pollution which are beyond the Earth's capacity to repair. So what is the safe operating space for humanity, which we have already crossed that safe operating space? There are certain controversies raised by this paper. There are issues about methodology, about the way certain projections are made, but the overall message of this paper in Nature is very relevant, that we are causing irreparable damage to Earth as a planet. And if we can go back to that slide again, I want to show that on the left side there is a major red bar crossing even beyond the Earth's surface, outermost surface, that is the biodiversity loss. So what is happening? On the right there is a red band that talks about nutrients like nitrogen and phosphorus, whose accumulation are going in the red zone, and on the left we are talking about biodiversity loss which is irreparable. In fact, these two are related. When the nutrients, because nutrients are required for growth of living organisms. So when these nutrients accumulate in a water body, the water body grows all kinds of organisms there, algae, fungi, weeds, plants. then that water body becomes weed infested, and then it takes away all the oxygen and the fish can't survive. Certain species die, certain new species grow. So the entire biodiversity composition of a water body can change. Similarly, on the even on the land, certain kinds of biodiversity can change when nutrient losses can happen. In fact, even too little nutrients can cause soil health damage. For example, in much of Africa, the major challenge of food production is lack of access to even the minimum amount of nutrients required for sustainable agricultural production. So the challenge of food security in Africa is lack of access to minimal amount of nutrients for agriculture, whereas the challenge in certain other parts like in Europe or US or even parts of Asia, including certain parts of India, the problem is too many nutrients are accumulating, are being used in certain kinds of agriculture, intensive pockets of agriculture, and then they are eventually leaked and lost from there, and they are landing up as pollutants. So we need to look at this link between nutrients as requirement for food and development, and the problem of too much or too little nutrients that can both threaten the development as well as harm the environment. The other slide that I want to show you is a map on the top left, where it captures the European nitrogen assessment in 2011. A body of scientists representing all over Europe, they have identified the various effects of mismanagement of one of the nutrients, that is nitrogen, reactive nitrogen. They say that it affects the greenhouse balance because some of the nitrogen, reactive nitrogen gases like NOx and NO2, N2O, nitrous oxide is a greenhouse gas. It causes global warming 300 times more potent global warming greenhouse gas than carbon dioxide or carbon monoxide. But when we talk of global warming, we only talk of carbon. This is an important aspect, that nitrous oxide is an important area. Similarly, there are effects on soil quality, there are effects on water quality, there are effects on air quality. All of them cause major damage to all aspects of the ecosystem, and at the center of the ecosystem is the biodiversity loss that we are talking about. If we can go back to this slide, long ago when fertilizers were not invented, the way reactive nitrogen was brought back into agriculture was by growing pulses or legumes, as you can see on the left side of the slide, or by using bird dropping or animal manure. In fact, in Guano in Latin America, a whole mountain of bird dropping was created with migratory birds, and the British used to mine this mountain, load it on the ships and supply it as, because it is rich in urea and uric acid, bird dropping. They were supplying it as fertilizer to the rest of the world and making money. And much later, the industrial method of making fertilizer chemically through the Haber-Bosch process became available, after which we make it now. We use the atmospheric nitrogen, add hydrogen to it, make it ammonia, add it to the carbon molecules, make it urea, and then sell it as a fertilizer. To that we add phosphate rock and potassium salts and make it NPK. Now the other important thing one should remember is that phosphate, which is supplied as a part of NPK fertilizer, unlike nitrogen gas which is abundant in the air, phosphate is not available in the air. It is only used as phosphate rock. It is mined from natural resource, which is a finite exhaustible resource. The estimates vary, but the world's reserves of rock phosphate will last anywhere between 50 to 300 years, depending on whether you can really access those deposits which are currently not accessible. India has less than 1% of its phosphate requirement available indigenously. All our phosphate for fertilizer production and other production has to be imported. So what is it? And in fact recently the food prices are increasing because fertilizer prices are increasing. Fertilizer prices are increasing because phosphate, which is an imported component of Indian fertilizer, its prices in the international market are increasing. So these are important challenges that we have to deal with, and we have to use these increasingly scarce resources or resources that could cause harm in the environment very sparingly, very efficiently. This slide shows the basic concept of nitrogen use efficiency as one example of nutrient use efficiency. NUE as a word can be used for nitrogen use efficiency if you are talking about nitrogen, or it can be used for nutrient use efficiency when you talk about other nutrients. The exact relationships might vary, but using these nutrients more efficiently is the way by which we can both reduce the cost of agricultural inputs as well as save the environment from nutrient pollution, both ways, and also make agriculture more remunerative to the farmer, who currently in India is facing a major problem. So as you can see in the slide, a plant has been shown which has to acquire its nutrients like nitrogen from the soil. You can sometimes sprinkle some fertilizer on the leaves as a spray, but most of the time it is given through the soil and plants take them up. Sometimes you can also get, as I mentioned earlier, nitrogenous compounds through rain as a precipitation. That is what is shown, one arrow on the top left. Then of course you add fertilizer and the middle arrow on the left. Then you can do crop rotation, like one crop of pulses and then one crop of cereal, like legume and cereal rotation. Because legumes can fix atmospheric nitrogen, they leave behind some of it for the next crop. All these are inputs of reactive nitrogen to the plant, the middle dark square in the slide. But plant cannot use all of it. It may lose some of it as a gaseous emission. It may also lose some of the soil may lose some of it away from the plant. So what is lost in the rooting zone of the plant can either go down to the groundwater table or escape far and wide into streams and water bodies, etc. So this is the real problem that we are facing. If we go back to the slide to show you another important aspect of this, of Indian agriculture, on the right corner we show a graph where a blue graph shows the partial factor productivity of nitrogen declining over the last few decades, even as fertilizer use has been increasing in the red graph over the decades. What it means is, during the initial decades of Green Revolution from the 60s onwards, we have intensified the use of chemical fertilizers in Indian agriculture. This is a 40-year experiment in the field stations of the Central Rice Research Institute, specifically the effect of fertilizer on rice productivity in Indian situation. They have shown that by the late 80s, the productivity of rice due to nitrogen input alone has already been saturated. After that, if you keep adding more and more nitrogen, it is not contributing to much productivity. That is what this means. So since the 90s, you are continuously using more fertilizer, but its contribution towards food production is not increasing. So what it, in other words, what it means is that mindless use of excessive fertilizers not only does not improve yield or food production, it actually leaves behind a lot of wastage. It leads to money wastage, it leads to environmental pollution, it could even, and that pollution could even have health and other effects apart from biodiversity loss, etc. Now this is an image that has taken many scientists by a shock. This is a model that shows the darkest parts on the global map on the left shows the highest accumulation of reactive nitrogen, all forms of reactive nitrogen, not the nitrogen N2 gas, but the reactive forms of it, which includes nitrate, nitrite, NO2, N2O, NOx, all of them. Most of it is nitrous oxide, of course. Over many continents of the world, you can see that there are intense dark red spots in almost every continent. Of course, and that is a cause for a serious concern. This was again a paper published in the world famous journal Science in 2008 by Jim Galloway, who also is the founder of the International Nitrogen Initiative, of which many of us as scientists are members, and we from the Indian Nitrogen Initiative that I represent have looked at, is the entire Indian region equally bad in terms of excessive nitrogen accumulation, or are there regional variations. So on the right you see an Indian map where the darkest color black shows input of fertilizer to the tune of more than 1500 kilograms of nitrogen per kilometer square, 15,000 kilograms of nitrogen per kilometer square per year. That actually which is environmentally very undesirable and dangerous, but that only shows 10 to 20% of the total agricultural region of India. The other dark red spots are still in the high range, but still there are huge areas of Indian agriculture which are receiving far less nitrogen than they require for sustainable agriculture. In Rajasthan, for example, or in many rain-fed areas of Jharkhand, Jharkhand or Chhattisgarh or Madhya Pradesh or parts of Bihar, rain-fed agriculture depends heavily on rain, and only when there is rain, fertilizer is of any use. When there is no rain, there is no crop and no fertilizer. So there fertilizer usage is very less. Now you see that, as I told you, loss of fertilizer inputs or nutrients from the agricultural system or sewage or other systems eventually reaches the sea. Sea is the ultimate sink of all pollution, whether nutrients, plastics, various other non-degradable pollution sources, they all eventually land up in the sea. This is a actual measurement of nitrate concentration in Indian coastal waters on the Indian peninsula, on both on the east coast and the west coast. As you can see, in many areas the amount of nitrogen has been particularly of concern on the eastern coast, in places like Tamil Nadu, coastal Andhra Pradesh, parts of Orissa, and so on. So this shows that in the Bay of Bengal, the accumulation of nitrogen as a nutrient has already become a concern. There are also regions within the coastal peninsular area where the seawater has become hypoxic or eutrophicated, as they say, where the oxygen concentration drops, and that affects the fish population, that affects the organisms that grow in the sea, that affects photosynthesis, and this leads to certain effects. The same is also happening to phosphate. Now phosphate comes not only from fertilizer, it also comes from urine, it also comes from detergents, certain detergents that use phosphates, other kinds of sources, but it also comes from fertilizer. So again, in the same Indian coastal peninsula, you see that on the eastern coast you see that in certain areas of coastal Andhra and parts of Tamil Nadu, there are, and Orissa, there are regions where phosphate concentrations are increasing. In the west coast, certain areas like in Kerala, parts of Karnataka, there is a problem, but not so much as you go further up on the west coast, because again in parts in northern Maharashtra and Gujarat, you are, there is a lot of rain-fed agriculture, and the loss of nutrients from there to the sea is much lesser. Now this slide shows actual measurement of certain algae that are considered as biomarkers for alteration of the coastal water quality. It is called eutrophication, it is called hypoxic areas, which means that the water is no longer as good as it is required to be for a healthy ocean, for a healthy sea. Wherever these algae accumulate, they cause changes in biodiversity, they cause death of fish and shrimp and other other ecosystem services of the marine and coastal ecosystems for fisheries and for other people whose livelihood depend on fisheries. They also have other effects in coastal aquaculture, for example. And in places like Maharashtra, Goa, Kerala coast, even in certain parts of Lakshadweep, parts of coasts of Gujarat, and on the eastern side, several parts of Tamil Nadu, parts of Andhra Pradesh and Orissa, up to 21 different toxic algal species that are a proof of growing hypoxia in the Indian oceans of the Indian peninsula have been found. So this is an area of concern. Not only for India, we must remember that seas are a common heritage of the entire world. There are other countries on other sides of Arabian Sea and other sides of Bay of Bengal. So when we pollute the sea, other countries are affected, or when other countries pollute the sea, we are affected. So there are bodies now like the Bay of Bengal body for land-based pollution of marine environments. Similarly, there are bodies looking at Arabian Sea or the Indian Ocean or Indo-Pacific Ocean. There is in fact in the United Nations Environment Programme, there is a whole program for global program of action for protection of marine environment from land-based pollution, in which nutrients are increasingly being recognized as major areas of concern. Now we have done a detailed map of both nitrogen and phosphate fertilizer use in India through the Indian Nitrogen Group and the South Asian Nitrogen Center that I represent. You can see that the usage of phosphate fertilizer is also equally skewed as on the right side as that of the nitrogen fertilizer that is shown on the left side. So the many black spots or dark red spots show excessive usage of these fertilizers beyond what is normally required for agriculture. Now this means that there is a lot of challenge in ensuring that the farmers are aware that excessive dumping of fertilizers is not going to help them, it only wastes their money, does not necessarily give better produce. It might actually affect their own health and their own economy while not giving better food production or food security or even livelihood security for that matter. Now in the Indian Nitrogen Group, over a period of time, some of us have tried to put together what are the various aspects of nutrient management from an interdisciplinary perspective that we should bring together in order to manage the nitrogen cycle, because each nutrient has its own cycle. Nitrogen has its own cycle, we call it the biogeochemical cycle of nitrogen. Phosphate has its own cycle, carbon has its own cycle. Each of these cycles are increasingly being altered by anthropogenic or human activities, whether it is agriculture, whether it is industry, whether it is shipping, aquaculture, whatever else. And many different disciplines, areas of expertise are required to bring together to understand the problem of reactive nitrogen and to suggest the ways of managing that problem. Because there is, as I said, there is increasing international concern over reactive nitrogen accumulation in Asia. There will be a stage when the Indian government will have to answer to the world as to what it is doing about reactive nitrogen or reactive phosphorus or other nutrients which are becoming a concern not only for the Indian region but for the international sustainable environment. So, for that we go into a variety of disciplines. We look at Indian nitrogen research as the major hub where multiple disciplines have to come together and meet, as I have showed you on this slide. We need experts from policy studies, we need people to look at the various sources of reactive nitrogen. If you can put back the slide on the screen. There are many sources for nitrogen, as I have already showed you before. Then there are many sinks where these nitrogen eventually accumulate, like water bodies, groundwater, seawater. Then there are many capacities required to understand this source and sink and the flow between the two. As you can see, the green box in the center left, this various sources of nitrogen, and on the center right various sinks of nitrogen, the sea or the agro ecosystem or the water body or even air quality. So, between the source and sink there is a movement of nutrients. You need to understand the flow of them, and then you need policy interventions to control that flow, to arrest that flow as required. Then on the middle left you see capacities. Capacities mean research capacities, understanding the sources of each of these nutrients, where they are wasted or lost. Capacity to look at the sinks, identify the sinks where they are lost, identify the flow from where the sources are connected to the sink. Then we need assessment. You need to quantify this. I have shown you some examples of quantification along the Indian coastal peninsula for nitrogen and phosphorus. We need to expand these studies, connect what we are observing in the coast to the activities on the land. That is a huge research problem in which various areas of scientists from soil science, from atmospheric science, from biological science, from environmental science, forestry, agriculture, they all have to come together, do their bit to understand how various land based activities are contributing to losses of reactive nitrogen, phosphorus and other nutrients into various environment, water, sea, land and air, and how do we control them. They need to model them. We need very advanced models to simulate these flows and quantities. Then we need to identify how to mitigate these effects and understand these impacts. So, the era of climate change has thrown huge challenges for science as much as for technologies as for the government. Many ministries which are used to working as separate unrelated entities have to now start working together. Forestry ministry, environment ministry, agriculture ministry, industry ministry have to talk to each other. They have to know that one thing that one ministry does has an impact on another ministry. Food security may be impacted if a certain other ministry does something else, or the agriculture ministry, if it is too relaxed on wastage of nutrients, it can impact other areas. So, the outer big boxes suggest color matched boxes suggest various sources like fertilizer, cattle, sewage, energy, etc. Various capacities like evaluative capacity, regional capacity, partnerships, research cooperation nationally, state wise or internationally, or assessment requirements in terms of monitoring locally, monitoring on a statewide or nationwide basis, monitoring long term, not just once. And then simulation, various requirements of simulation, the programs, the models, the units of measurement. Different people have to use same units of measurement, otherwise we don't make sense to each other. The depths of measurement in soil also matters. The way in which you express, whether you express a certain nutrient as kilograms per kilometer square, or grams or teragrams per hectare or acre, each of them make a difference to the way you connect all this data into a national map. Lot of interconvertibility, interoperability of the data is required. And then we need to go into mitigation, where we have to improve nutrient use efficiency, as I have shown one example before for nitrogen. You need to look at impacts like eutrophication or toxic algal blooms, as I have showed in the previous slide, is one impact. It has already happened. Similarly, biodiversity loss is an impact that has already happened to whatever extent it has. More of it may happen. So we need to look at these impacts and look at this is the blue box on the right side, the impact, the eutrophication, the biodiversity, the groundwater pollution and the outside pollution, drinking water, air, vegetables. Sometimes vegetables can grown on either side of a polluted water nala can accumulate lot of heavy metals, nutrients and such things which can enter the food chain. So sometimes even toxic levels of nutrients or heavy metals are entering the food chain, and there are a serious health concern also. That's health is an impact of nutrient pollution. So one needs to, so doctors are involved, medical scientists are involved. So unless we work like a network to understand each of the nutrient cycles, this is just one example for nitrogen, but we need similar networks. Like we had, it took us 20 years to build such a network for carbon when India faced a huge climate change challenge. 20 years ago, when India was blamed that rice agriculture causes methane or farming or animal farming leads to methane production, and that also causes as much global warming as industrialization. India took a long time to put together all the data from agriculture, from industry, from various aspects of the carbon cycle, and face the world criticism that no, India did not contribute so much to the methane or other global warming carbon gases to the damage of the ozone layer. And in fact, it is indeed the industrialized countries, the developed countries, which have been doing this for a much longer period in human history. So those who have caused the biggest damage to the ozone layer have to take the biggest responsibility for mitigation of this impact. Now this is the carbon aspect of the climate change, which many of you have heard. The same story is going to repeat in nitrogen. Are we ready as a scientific community to come together from all aspects of the nitrogen cycle, understand this and give a unified solution to the government to face this criticism, or even to take the required policies to take action on the ground to control the pollution at the source, or to damage or repair the pollution at the sink. Now this requires several institutions to be brought up, and one of the last slides I want to show you is the range of institutions like the universities, the agricultural institutions, environment ministry, science technology ministry, national laboratories, institutes, Department of Space. They do a lot of satellite and mapping and modeling, and even the CSIR. This is another interdisciplinary, interministerial, interinstitutional requirement for acting on the challenges of the nutrient cycle. Let us please remember, just because you don't see the problem, it doesn't mean it's not there. We cannot push these things under the carpet for too long. Of course, here you see the bottle, but it signifies the unseen accumulation of nutrients in the sea which are causing major damage. We don't have much time. The era of climate change is threatening the very existence of civilization, and we need to act fast. Every country needs to do that, India as much as any other country. I hope this has given you an idea of the overall issue of nutrient management with specific examples of nitrogen and phosphorus, and we will end with a video that summarizes this specifically from the nitrogen aspect. And let us play that video, which will tell you how this whole thing impacts all of us.
You have
Thank you very
raised
much.
you have raised a very important issue through this this link. And sir, I would like to ask you that as you said that the things, or we can say those which are we are considering it as pollutants are actually the nutrients. Would you throw more light on this, as you told about this nitrogen? Are there other elements also which we consider as pollutants, or can emerge out as nutrients?
Surely. Nitrogen is one of the largest inputs added into food production, but we also have phosphorus, which I have already shown. Very soon sulfur might become a problem. Certain heavy metals are becoming a problem, though they are not nutrients. They are very minor, some of them are micronutrients which are required in extremely small quantities. But when they come as a part of pollution, they come in very large quantities. So there they are actually toxic, very toxic.
Although, as you said, that it is all a cyclic process, that it goes from one to one another and,
Yes.
and then come back. Are there any human activities or other kind of things which destroy these nutrients? Do you feel so? There are some activities we are going through which destroy them.
That's a good question. The natural ability of the environment to repair or reconvert reactive forms of nitrogen back into inert nitrogen gas. 70% of all our air is just nitrogen, N2, but that's not very harmful, as we had shown in the video. But the other reactive forms like NO3, NO2, NOx, N2O, these are the problem. Some of them can be converted back to N2 by certain natural processes, but these processes are too slow, too inefficient, and the rate of their conversion is not large enough as compared to the rate of accumulation of these nutrients. The same is true for phosphate. So, for example, when all the phosphate from earth and all the planet from phosphate rock eventually lands up in the sea, where will you get the phosphate back into your agriculture? So, you have to stop it from where it is lost rather than bringing it back after it is lost. It's both costly and complicated.
What are the other challenges you feel while making your students learn about this nutrients management? Do you feel there are other challenges also which are need to be considered or which are need to be highlighted? Are there any?
Yes, certainly the an important challenge is scientific challenge itself, as I tried to talk about. We are asking the government to put together a program, a nationwide scientific program, like they did for carbon, to start a program for reactive nitrogen, phosphorus and other important nutrient, or you can call it as a national nutrient management program, which would involve science, which would involve environmental measurement, which would involve identification of sources, sinks, and maybe some government functionaries have to take important policy decisions. So, some pollution norms may have to be revised, or certain technologies may have to be replaced. So, these are challenges, and eventually options are available, as was also shown in the previous video. Some options are available. I won't say that all options are ready, but the important problem is that we have to be able to make people aware, the scientists to take up such problems, the government to bring together programs, incentives to enable scientists to take up these problems, to have policies in place for or incentives and disincentives for industries or farmers to comply with them. So, it's a very collective kind of activity, and doing anything collectively in this country is itself a big challenge. We need to really learn a lot to work together. We are still so hung up on subject labels, disciplinary labels. I am a physicist, I am a biologist, I am a biotechnologist, or whatever. But at the top, when you have to take decisions in a government, you are not taking a botanical or a zoological or a physical decision. You are taking a policy decision where all disciplines have to come together. That's, I think, a bigger challenge.
As you said that there is an awareness which we needed, but do you think if we involve more and more of the youth into this kind of activities and various platforms, it will give some sense of awareness also and innovative ideas also how to overcome it?
Oh, surely. Our experience has been for that. For example, when I was involved in conducting a small side event in the Conference of Parties under Convention for Biological Diversity, you would know that we had a Convention for Biological Diversity global conference in Hyderabad a couple of years ago, when we brought all the whole world was there discussing, you know, biological diversity, climate change and everything. We held a small side event. We made people aware about the role of nutrients in biological diversity, and many people were surprised. They did not know that this link existed. So, and many young people were very enthused to go back and talk about it to, you know, their teachers, their scientists. Some people want to take it up as a research career. Some people, when they get into government, they want to address it. So it is an important area for young people as much as
yes,
for
sir, you have raised a very important issue and very important point, and our only concern is how to manage these nutrients. Yes. Dr. N. Raghuram will be coming tomorrow also in this EduSet lecture of ours. That is, he is going to deliver you more views and more points on this very topic. Thank you so very much, sir, for being with us.
My pleasure.